Okay. Hi, my name is Bree Newton, and my research question was on Christian ideals and their effect on shaping the American identity. And my main claim was basically that the Bible, hint, this is also my conclusion, is the baseline of the American identity today and in the past. So my first argument is that our morals, everyday life, just walking across the street, smiling at someone, treating your neighbor the same way you would treat yourself, loving others, giving to the poor, are all based around the Bible. And also, 3/4 of Americans today identify themselves as Christians, so that pretty much by itself shows that that's a large part of our identity. So example texts that back this up historically. The Declaration of Independence has sometimes been called America's Bible. Funny. And so is the Constitution. That was my primary document that I linked it to. I mean, it says the word God so many times. We are one nation under God. So I think that's a pretty primary example that shows that. And then the setup of our government, I thought this was really interesting. So if men were angels, no government would be necessary. So a Christian ideal is that we all sin and we all make mistakes, and we know that. And our government is set up the same way. I mean, we have the separation of powers, we have checks and balances. We know that we make mistakes and we can't have one leader. So as America, we set up our government in the same way as like a biblical hierarchy. Okay, so some of our founders, Jefferson, Jay, Madison, Adams, Henry, these are like, you know them. They all are Christian, every single one of them. And also the original people that were here, both the Puritans and the Pilgrims, came over for religious freedom, and 98% of the initial colonists were Christian. So, I mean, if the initial people to come to America and like set up like the grounds of what we are today were Christian, how could you argue that our country doesn't identify itself as Christian? So, here's a little background on what I'm going to touch on next. The Greatest Generation, 86% of them identify as Christian, and they were anyone from the 1900s to 1924. And then millennials are anyone born from 1980 to the mid-2000s. And only 56% of them identify as Christian, which is obviously like a huge change in a short amount of time. And then that's Jesus, just in case you didn't know. So, and here is like all of the generational cohorts, and then like all the faiths that they identify as, which I just thought was really interesting. And this is done by Pew Research Center, which is very credible. Okay, so the deficiency in today's society. Because of this, because of the difference in how many of them were Christians, the Bible prohibits in Matthew 15:19 abortion. This shows how many white evangelicals who are millennials think that abortion is morally wrong versus not, which is 35% to 50%. These are just a few examples of the many that show the ethical deficiency of millennials due to the fact that most of them are not, less of them are Christians, against the generational cohort of the greatest Americans. That's just a few examples. So my solution is the Bible, and I have like all these arrows because it's so obvious that we need to go back to the time when the Bible was the most prominent thing, to go back to getting morals. If Christianity was the core of such a democratic, republic society, then there's an obvious correlation between the fact that there were morals and now there's less. So it will continue to decrease unless we go back to our foundation, which is the Bible. And then there are my references of 2 slides.
How valid and reliable are your sources, and how do you know, and which sources didn't work?
Okay, so most of my sources were rather reliable. I mean, a lot of them were Christian.net or like Republican. So I was like, well, this is really biased. So then I tried to look on the Atlantic. Most of them seem to be backed up. I mean, Pew Research Center by itself is well known. They obviously are, most people know you can go to Pew Research Center and get reliable data. And what was the second question?
How do you know?
I know because I did look at all the sources to make sure that it wasn't biased. And then I looked up the credibility. I mean, because I wasn't sure about the one other place that I got my references, that I let me show you. I wasn't sure about this foundation, but I did look it up and it is credible, like, I read through their pages.
How do you know that it's credible? You're saying, yes, I know. How do you know?
Because they used many people. It wasn't just a small amount of people. Like, it was a large survey, and it was a survey of many different religions and many people across, like, the entire United States and not just one.
Thank you.
How does your conclusion respond to any of the other research or sources you examined?
So the whole time I was looking, I didn't exactly start with the Bible because I wasn't sure, like, what would a solution be? Like, get more ethical? That doesn't make sense. Because it showed that that those who weren't Christians didn't have the ethics. And then I was like, well, where can they find that ethics? How do we do that? And then I was like, oh, it would be an increase in the Bible. So the Bible backs up the fact that those who aren't Christian need that to become more ethical.